Hello, good afternoon. Good afternoon. Thank you for joining us today. Good to have your company. I hope your day's, well, frankly, I hope your day's been better than mine. It's been a busy one today. A few bits and pieces coming up. The job of school leadership never ceases to surprise you, does it? But it's worth it in the long run. So I hope you've had a great half a term so far, and I hope the half-term break is looming large and close for you, whether it's next week or the week after. I do hope you're able to switch off for at least a day. But if your inbox, if your job list is anything like mine, there's so many things I put off until half-term, as in work-wise, policy stuff, paperwork stuff that you put off to half-term that you don't always get much of a half-term. But I do hope you manage to switch off. Welcome to this webinar today, supporting and developing your middle leaders. We thought long and hard. I mean, the Pathway program, which I'm sure you'll know about by now, which is bringing a great deal of positive impact to schools and to CPD generally, has lots of different facets and features, multiple different courses. It's more than one course, as you'll know. It's many, many different courses and different themes. But underpinning all of that is very much, as you'll know, the way we support the whole teacher, the whole educator. And how you support the whole middle leader is true too. What I mean by that is it's not just their career aspirations, is it? It's their motivation, it's their well-being, it's their sense of ownership of their department. How do you motivate a middle leader to take ownership of their section, their phase, their department, whilst at the same time feel that they really are contributing to whole school improvement, to whole school progress, which I think is kind of the balance, isn't it? And that's what this is about. And it's really, it's showing you how I believe Pathway really does help deliver on that in many, many different ways. And in so doing, I hope at the very least, if you're not going to continue to pursue Pathway and purchase it for your school, I hope at least it will give you a good half hour of good CPD on how to support your middle leaders. But do have a look. During this conversation, it is a conversation. You know, we always like to welcome your thoughts, your comments, your questions, and I'll try and keep an eye on the chat stream as we go. And obviously, if you want to join in the conversation on social media, we've always used the hashtag the whole teacher, because we think that teachers are more than brains on legs. And as the late great Ken Robinson would say, let's not just use our bodies as receptacles to take our brains from one meeting to the next. Let's be a whole person if we can. Hence the comment about half term. I know I'm ready for mine. Oh, that's a picture of me some years ago, so we'll move on from that. But I'm a head teacher at the moment at Oscar Wimbledon. It's my fourth headship. 25 years in education. I'm an education advisor and Pathway lead author to Discover Education, which is a fantastic organisation that I really enjoy working with and for. And of course, we work in full conjunction with the NHT on Pathway. It's a terrific partnership. And I've been doing a lot of CPDs over the years. And I'm a former primary head and deputy head and director of studies. Anyway, that's enough. That's not, didn't need to jump in for a biography. And I think that photo was taken some years ago. Middle leadership in schools. Well, I mean, let's just do the nomenclature, really, the terminology. We mean subject leaders, don't we? Heads of department, heads of year, phase, key stage leaders, any sort of personnel with a whole school responsibility. There are lots of different TLRs, as you'll know, that are available if you can afford them for various different whole school aspects. Actually, just recently appointed another DEI, diversity, equality and inclusion lead, and having a big discussion with them about how we can motivate them and get them to feel a sense of ownership of that, and also whilst contributing to whole school improvement. So depends what you call them, but I think we know what middle leaders are, the backbone of the school. So we're going to look at keeping middle leaders motivated, contributing to whole school improvement, as I talk about, identifying and supporting middle leaders' career aspirations, especially around this time. If you're having, like I am, all the appraisal meetings, all the performance management target meetings and so forth, call it what you like, but it's how we support and challenge and monitor. So now is a timely thing to be doing that. And we have, like a lot of small schools, everybody's a middle leader because everybody's responsible for something. We're doing this together. So it's an important time to be looking at career aspirations, evaluating leadership skills and competencies, resilience in leadership. Middle leadership, I always find, certainly in my 25-year career, it was in the middle leadership years, if you like, where I tried to develop that sense of resilience so that when you get into school leadership, if that's the route you wish to take, you're battle hardened. That's probably the wrong phrase, but you have that resilience. Because it's not a popularity contest, is it? Leading a school improvement project we're going to talk a little bit about that, preparing for senior leadership and professional advice for middle leaders. Not that all middle leaders necessarily aspire to senior school leadership. Why should they? Why should they? But we're going to have a little chat about that. So I hope that's a decent menu, if you like. So Pathway, NEHC Discovery Education Pathway is an online program supporting professional and personal development. We're very, very keen and committed, as anybody who knows has been on these webinars before will know. We're very committed to developing not just your professional capacity, your professional currency, these rather fashionable phrases now, your knowledge and understanding of how to teach, but also your well-being, your motivation, why you do this job in the first place. And perhaps underpinning all of that, kind of your empowerment, your sense of agency, that you are actually having a difference, which is why we do it. Multiple CPD courses across the whole program with, I think it was about 140 films actually that we made when we were up in Manchester in various locations, making various different CPD films. And each of those are accompanied by some academic writing and some questions for reflection. And of course, in all of the different courses, there's space for you to input your thoughts, your reflections, because it's about you. It's about, it's not just what you know, is it, that matters? It's what you can do with what you know, I think, as an educator, as a learner, really. And however you cut it, I always think that's inextricably linked to how you feel. Eric Jensen said, didn't he, how we feel is what's real. It's the link to what we think. And I think that's true. How we feel is what's real. It's the link to what we think. I feel busy today, and that's affecting how I think. So we need to look at how we feel. Tools to support self-motivation, skills auditing and career mapping. And then the whole program is designed really to encourage reflective practice. I think only then do we really, really make sustainable improvements and progress in our own work, really, when we are reflective practitioners. What worked? What didn't work? How can I make it a little bit better next time? And so on. So that reflection is really what Pathway is all about. I'm tired of attending CPDs delivered by experts who used to teach and maybe even have a book out, but tell us the way to do it. I just think a bit of self-help, a bit of self-discipline, a bit of self-discovery, self-motivation. It's we have the answers. It just largely depends on how empowered we feel to deliver on those answers and to deliver the knowledge that we do have. And there isn't one particular way of teaching, as we know. So we encourage you to reflect on what's going well and maybe some of the areas that you can develop and improve. Keeping middle leaders motivated was the first little subheading, wasn't it? We had tremendous fun filming with a chap called Mark Turner. Fabulous expert in motivation. Very, very interesting chap. We'll go in and have a look at this program, actually. And this is a course that we designed within the Pathway program on a guide to motivation, really. And as with all the courses in Pathway, there are different sections down the left-hand side, and every course begins with an introduction, and then you continue, and then there's a little film. And I had the great privilege of interviewing all of these different people, actually. And there's a fantastic little introductory film to the program, which in this case is based on motivation. Where's my motivation? It's not a luxury. It's not something, it's not an add-on, it's an essential part. And we kind of know when we have it, and we know when we don't. And how to cope with the things that demotivate us, I think, is just as important as identifying what does motivate us. And this kind of almost a self-help sort of thing really helps you to understand the nature of motivation, identify what motivates you in our motivation plan, and then actually with lots of thought pieces, various different sections within that. I'm going to go through lots of different features today, so I'm going to be quick on this one. Increasing your awareness of motivational needs of others, talking to others in the language of their motivations, talking to middle leaders in the language of what motivates them makes all the difference. Find out what motivates them, whatever it is. Creativity, I don't know, running trips, a sense of order. I don't know, data inputting. I don't know what it is that motivates them, but we usually have a thing, don't we? Or several things. With me, I think it's what I've just literally run out of, which was congratulating all of our wonderful students on a brilliant musical concert that we've literally just finished. That's a fantastically motivating thing for me to do. So what motivates your middle leaders? And understanding then how you can actually improve the way you communicate with them, because you're on the same page then. Considering the language of motivation as well is another really important section. So each section has films and it has thought pieces, and followed by questions for reflection that you need to then answer. And we find that a really good way of delivering the knowledge and the understanding, but doing so in ways which don't patronize you and tell you how to do it. This is just dummy text in here, as you can see. One of these days I'm going to write in here something rude. And you move on to the next one and it saves it. And you go through to an introduction. You then, you're going to have a film. And then that's a very interesting film actually about the language of motivation, a thought piece. And then, you're going to have questions for reflection. Again, lots of different questions. You can write as much or as little as you like into these boxes and then save it, and you can come back. And who knows, if you're studying perhaps for NPQH, NPQSL, maybe a master's, some of your answers in here you may wish to then copy and paste into essays that you're writing for other postgrad work. Why not? Why not double bubble it if you can? Whilst doing this does not automatically give you the credits that you can take to a university, if you are studying at the same time, this is a very good place to practice and to reflect and use that. Okay, so that's a really interesting guide to motivation, a very useful thing to be doing when you're appraising your middle leaders, I would argue. The next section was, this was a fascinating course that we had with a wonderful lady called Hannah Tudor, very experienced head teacher. She's in her second headship right now. And when she did this film, she was just coming to the end of her first headship, where she she and her team turned a school around and achieved excellent, outstanding in all areas. And that was no mean feat. My goodness gracious me, because it wasn't like that a few years before. And her course is actually school improvement. I've done it. What's next? And that sounds arrogant. Anybody who meets Hannah knows that she is the most down-to-earth, most modest, self-deprecating sort of person. And it's supposed to be slightly ironic because she's a bit of a quandary now, or at the time when she made the course, because she had, hopefully, I think what she turned or helped to encourage many of her staff, middle leaders, to go from being change averse, which many were, to almost change junkies and addicted to improving the school. And they got that momentum going, which is the very best thing in my career, if you get momentum rather than inertia. And she's got the momentum, got the rock rolling, and everybody became rather addicted to improving and making changes. But you're excellent in all areas. So what next? Which is really interesting. She said she was the most vulnerable she'd ever been when they got that excellent, outstanding inspection report. Because as she said, we were only outstanding on that day, at that particular moment, and the only way is down. So it's a really honest, very open course. Made lots of films together. I interviewed her lots of times in the course of this, and we had some nice discussions about how do you, once you've encouraged your middle leaders and staff to become change junkies, what next? How do you allow them to strut their stuff? And it was a really interesting course, actually. So a good way, perhaps a good tool, if you have a middle leader who is showing great promise and far from being change averse, they are actually now really starting to see it rolling. Keep an eye on what happens when it's done. What will happen next, which I think is a very interesting proposition, isn't it, really? Right, I'm just going to keep an eye on the chat stream always. Thank you very much. I think we're okay to keep going. Yes, we are. Right, so I'll just whiz back to our piece. We're talking now about still keeping middle leaders motivated. But if we're going to do that, if we're going to talk about perhaps the invisible aspects of teaching and of leadership, then we could do no better than actually getting to look at this program designed for us by Professor Tim O'Brien and Dr. Dennis Guiney, two well-known figures in the world of well-being, absolutely brilliant teachers, special educational needs teachers actually, and university lecturers in human development and psychology, adolescent development, and principally on mental health and well-being. And we made the most amazing films together. And it was a thoroughly enjoyable experience where we looked at the nature of well-being, really. I knew the phone would go. The nature of well-being, understanding well-being, navigating and traversing the emotional landscape. Well, when I started teaching 25 years ago, that wasn't really a sentence or a phrase I'd ever come across. How the world has changed, thank goodness, for the better. Now, even that phrase doesn't scare people. Now, it actually intrigues. We become quite interested in how we can indeed navigate and traverse the emotional landscape. This is a really interesting, really powerful course filled with lots of different films. So again, the usual style. You open with an introduction. You go to a fascinating film. Really interesting discussion we had around what critical reflection actually means and what well-being means. And then you have a brilliant thought piece written by these brilliant academics with some suggested reading as well. And then we go to another thought piece. What is this thing called well-being, and what is it not? Because I think there's a great deal of confusion sometimes as to what it is. Perhaps one of your middle leaders is the well-being lead. We have now appointed a mental health and well-being lead. So you might say they're a middle, well, they are a middle leader. How are you going to help them to actually really deliver it? Well, this is a brilliant tool. If they read this course, if they watch the films and write their reflections, they will become really quite expert on well-being, and what it is and what it isn't. And then an introduction, and then another film, as you'll be used to. And then we continue, understanding our emotions. So some fascinating resources here. And then you're always going to get to those questions for reflection, where you can write what you think and then save it. Those are the answers I put in last time. Write in whatever you like. And then perhaps if you're doing a mini school project on well-being, how we cope with stress, what's the difference between pressure and stress for you? We had a fascinating discussion in the film, actually, where Professor Tim O'Brien had a view that stress is not a good thing for you in certain circumstances. And Dr. Dennis Geiner, his writing partner, disagreed. That in certain situations, it's a good thing. So we had a fascinating discussion. Is stress good for you in certain times, certain doses? I don't know what you think. A few days before the half-term break, I'm not sure the stress is a good thing. But I don't know, perhaps it keeps us on our toes. So fascinating discussion to have with a middle leader, perhaps, as they embark on their new role and as they perhaps prepare for senior leadership. So well worth a look, the wellbeing program. It really is. We then actually have this career map. So again, one of the ways in which we can really support middle leaders is to help them identify what next. What is the next course for them? Do they see themselves as a head of department for the next 2 or 3 years or 5 years? What comes after that? But so often I think in schools over the last 25 years that I've been teaching, the focus always seems to be on what professional role are you going to secure next? What is your next professional role? And that's only a third of it. That's not even half of what it's about. That's a third of what it's about. And I explain what I mean when I go into the career map itself. So we built a career mapping tool, which we're very proud of. And I hope it takes us there now. Skip verification. And I'm really proud of this, actually. So it's divided into 3, which is why I said it's only a third of your professional role is only a third of your career aspirations. What I mean by that is, I'll give you a quick example. Rather than go straight to build my career map, in Blue Peter fashion, I'll show you one I made earlier. Through a series of questions which are live and you put in your answers and you save and you continue and you continue. What you will build on this is a career map divided into 3 sections. The professional roles you hope to secure in the first and second years, 3rd and 4th years, 5th and 6th years, 7th, 8th, maybe 9th and 10th years of your career. Maybe you'll have 10 years in teaching. He says it's 25 years. Where are you going to map this out in terms of the professional roles you wish to secure? Is it senior leadership, or is it actually advanced skills? Is it delivering CPD? Or is it, as I've often seen, doing 2 or 3 years teaching and then writing a book about teaching and then stop teaching and deliver CPD? I don't know. I've seen quite a bit of that recently. I tend to like to take it from those who are still doing it. So I don't know. Perhaps you'll do that on the side. There's lots of different routes. And as an educator, you have so many options, but only if you stay a whole person, if you see what I mean. And so we think that it was a good idea to map out the additional skills and interests. Let's call it the extracurricular clubs and activities that we all enjoy. I run a chess club. I'm about to run a Lego club. I'm a mad passionate drummer. I've been a drummer since I was 10. So that's 40 years I've played the drums. What is your thing? And I want space in this school to fill my motivation. So, what are the things that motivate you? And I think those are the things that get us out of bed. We've got a Halloween writing competition, which we've just launched. That's the kind of stuff that gets me out of bed. That's what really gets me excited. Writing competitions and things, not necessarily the promise of, I don't know, in a few years' time, another professional role. So what other curricular interests are your middle leaders interested in when you have your appraisals with them? What else do they want to do? How do they want to grow something? Because I think as educators, we all love growing stuff. And sometimes we don't see that growth. So what else can you do that you can grow? And then thirdly, most importantly, your health and wellbeing goals. I wrote this as a sort of a dummy text, but it's loosely based on me, actually. In my second year, I planned to join a gym, do some swimming, and then 3 or 4 years in, I planned to perhaps lead a mindfulness club, upgrade my gym membership to include weekly fitness classes. Didn't do that. 5th and 6th years, start a weekly leadership vlog, run a half marathon. I didn't do that. Plan an Iceland cruise trip. Didn't do that. But it's because I didn't have a map at the time. I didn't have any of those things at the time. And I just think, I know it sounds a bit cosmic planning, but you write it down, it matters. It matters to you. If it's all about the children, I know it's always all about the children. The children deserve to have the best version of you in front of them, don't they? They really do. And I think this helps you to help your middle leaders to become that best version by having life outside school. So how do you grow that life as well? Run a full marathon, plan that Kenyan safari trip you always said you were going to do. 8 years into teaching, that's what I really wanted to do. I didn't do it because I didn't have this tool. I would now climb the UK's 3 high peaks, deliver mindfulness courses within school for staff. I don't know, but it's a good idea you don't have to share it with anyone, but it's nice if you do. And if your middle leaders are on this program, well, what a terrific thing to share in an appraisal meeting to make it mean more, frankly. Worth doing, I think. So that's the career map. And then we have the skills audit. So helping your middle leaders evaluate their leadership skills and competencies. Well, obviously we have the teacher standards, we have the new head teacher standards, but what else do we have? So what we did on Pathways, we worked with head teachers, professors who are university lecturers in MEd leadership, and a leadership recruitment consultant, a former head who'd been a head for 25 years and now works with some very well-known leadership recruitment agencies, companies, on assisting on headship interviews. So we put those people in a room and we said, what do you really, really need to be able to do as a leader in a school? And we wrote all those down. And it's the leadership skills audit. The teaching skills audit, of course, is deliberately based on the teacher standards, as you would expect. So we took each of those teacher standards and we simply turned each one into I can statements, frankly, to use the old-fashioned phrase. And you just simply loosely start to just evaluate yourself. And in doing so, you will be able to see which areas are your strengths and which areas need developing. A very useful thing when you're going into perhaps some mentoring sessions, coaching sessions, or a more formal appraisal session. And then we had the leadership audit. And so we identified with those other leaders 14 different competencies that we genuinely feel from talking to leaders are of most use, of most value. How are you doing with each of those? Maybe you could sit down with a middle leader aspiring to be a senior leader and go through these. How do they feel they're doing on these? And if they feel that some of these they certainly need developing, well, then you've identified something for a training course. You've identified something for them to develop, either with you or at a course externally, or get some visiting twilight. However, so I think this has been quite a useful skills audit. And as with all of these features in Pathway, it's a script. It's a nice discussion script when you're meeting with your middle leaders. So I hope that's been useful. We'll move on. It's a lightning speed because, I mean, it's 4:25 already. We also made some courses with there's dozens and dozens of courses on the Pathway program, all with, as I said, films, writing materials, and questions for reflection. And we made a couple on resilience, particularly one called Professional Resilience and Reflection with John Grove. So John Grove is still head teacher. He's been a head teacher for 25 years plus. A head teacher for 25 years. It's extraordinary, and a very, very, very experienced man. Now a CEO of a multi-academy trust and still ahead. And amazing, amazing fellow. And he talked about professional resilience and reflection. And we'll go and have a look at his course. And I had tremendous discussions with him actually about this business of headship. And he comes at it from a really interesting angle. And who is your luck? He said, where do you get your luck from? I haven't had a lot of that, I have to say, in the last few weeks. So I'm due some. Who is the person that you go to make you feel a bit better, to talk it through? Who keeps you, on the straight and narrow? Who boosts you? Who motivates you? Who is your confidant? Who's your bat phone? And also leading with a compass, this idea of leading with a moral compass, if you like, but also having direction, having that North Star Very interesting section of the course, actually, that is. Very cleverly written, with a nice discussion. We always have these little one-to-one discussions, which was a fascinating discussion about some of the aspects of leadership. And then a thought piece every time. Very interesting thought piece. But they're not long. You could do a whole course in, I don't know, maybe a PPA afternoon, or maybe, I don't know, Tuesday evening and Sunday morning, and then walk the dog. I don't know when, or you could perhaps give them a whole day to do 2 courses, perhaps with a peer. On an inset day, you could get some of these done. And it's nice to actually encourage middle leaders to do the same course together, almost like a mini book club. Then they're actually watching, it's like doing your homework together. They're watching the film together. They're reading the piece together. They're discussing their reflections before they put them into as answers. Okay, and then you continue every time, and then you continue to your questions. You could write a sentence, you could write 10,000 word thesis if you wished, but some very interesting questions. You can't get them right or wrong. They're designed to make you think. And then we wrote another course, actually. I'll actually go in this way, with David Gumbrell. Fascinating coach, former head teacher and teacher, and now a resilience coach. Really interesting, actually. Really interesting, lovely, very kind man. And he talked about the effect of resilience on your ability to teach, which was really interesting. He talks about spring. He uses the analogy of a spring, and it's a fascinating course, actually. Again, with discussions, roundtable discussions, actually, with fellow teachers who are teaching, an introduction, lots of different questions to begin with, and then a discussion, a roundtable discussion in the studio in Manchester where we were with teachers about how stretched is your spring. And it was a fascinating discussion, actually. David uses very simple analogies to get across some abstract things about our resilience. Very well done, very well written. And he has a series of books out, actually, on resilience. And then, of course, questions for reflection at the end. How predictable is your resilience? When and how do you ask for help with your resilience? John Grove, in his resilience course, often talked about asking for help, even after 25 years of headship. Who do you ask for help? And the effect of resilience on your ability to teach, but also on your ability to lead. So that's a terrific course, well worth a look, actually. And leading a whole school project. Mark Deacon produced a brilliant film on running small leadership projects within your school as an aspiring leader. And he's a university lecturer, works with PGCE students and getting them into student placements and so forth, and then following them as ECTs. Very, very experienced, 20 years as a science teacher at least, and very interesting chap. And we talked a lot about this idea of trying it on for size, trying a small whole school project, leading it, identifying where there's a need, what are you going to change, take action, and no battle plan survives the first contact, so replanning again, because there's always something that goes wrong. I've found that. And just generally about exploring leadership. A brilliant course for an aspiring, well, for a middle leader to really focus on. And as a result of this, they will have been helped at least to complete a whole school improvement project, but a small, attainable, a smart one, if you like. And that's well worth a look, actually. Well worth a look. Good course. And then preparing for senior leadership with Mike Abraham, who is a very, very experienced leadership recruiter, having had 20-odd years, 25 years as a head teacher. And I looked with Mike at how we can actually really prepare middle leaders for senior leadership roles, if that's where they want to go, and you're obviously welcoming of that. We want to help them. I always think it's great to have this sort of trickle of 2, 3, 4, maybe 5 years of middle leadership. Perhaps it's less, 2 or 3 years, and they move on, and then you get another crop in. And where do they go then? And what are they going to do? How can you help them to move up to deputy headship, or even, or headship, if that's what they wish to do? And then I think that's what this course is about. It's from someone on the other side of the desk who's doing the interview. He's interviewed, at the time it was about 97, 98 different headship interviews he's sat in on, which is a lot when you think about it, and the process involved. And he's been involved in all of those. He's a professional recruiter now, working with schools and sitting on the other side of the desk from the interviewee. And he shares his thoughts on on how to best prepare for the interview, the application, how to go for the right job. Make sure you go for the right one if you like. And it's a fascinating course, and it's a very interesting one to share with leaders. So I hope that's been helpful as well. Definitely worth a look at that one, actually. Great. And then finally, professional advice for middle leaders. So we're proud to be working with the NHT. And of course, we also have the Advice Hub, authored by Guy Dudley and his team, head of advice at the NHT for many years. And we've produced all these different resource banks and all these different tiles. Each of these tiles contain advice pieces. Let's go into human resources, which, as anyone in headship knows, is going to be a big section. A lot of my time is on that. And so here are the resource pieces. PDFs. Some of them are a page, some of them are 20 pages. Some of them are, but they're designed usually to be sort of short, pithy pieces to get you out of trouble, to get you to the right piece of advice that you need. And there is plenty of opportunity to use this to support middle leaders. If we go into the leadership section, actually, rather than HR, leadership and governance, there are actually some specific pieces written to support middle leaders in here. He says, rapidly going through the menu, trying to find them. There we are. This is just, I mean, there's lots. There's more than one, but I'll just show you one of them. For example, just a quick one: time management tips for middle leaders. Make peace with your to-do list. Something about prioritizing. Oh, that's right. They're not important and not urgent. A nice little piece, actually. I mean, this is just one. Oh, eat more frogs. It's the old Mark Twain quote, isn't it? Wonderful. If that's the most disgusting thing you have to do, do it first thing in the morning. And then the rest of the day is plain sailing. Okay, so lots of different opportunities there to look at different advice pieces, that many of which are actually designed to support middle leaders, whether it's professional advice, policies, and so forth, or whether it's templates, whether it's models of how to do things, but also there's case studies which Guy often likes to write, case studies of where things have gone wrong, perhaps. So thousands, I think now, I don't think it's hundreds, I think it's thousands of different resources, all inside this advice hub, which is a part of the Pathway program. So it's vast when you think about it. 12 questions for every middle leader. Let's have a quick look at this one. What questions? What are the strengths in your subject area? What are the key areas for development? What have been your key priorities? How well do pupils achieve in your subject? These are useful questions, actually, if you're working with a middle leader, helping them improve, develop. How do you monitor standards? Yeah, useful, really useful, really useful. Great. Well, I hope that's been a useful little romp through the Advice Hub. I've tried to keep this nice and short. Thank you for I'm just looking, actually, there's been a few difficult questions and things. They've all been answered by my colleague, as always. Thank you, Bobby. I hope this has been a useful, brief explanation of how the Pathway program, which is vast, contains quite a few bits and pieces that would really help you to help your middle leaders feel motivated, feel aspirational with their career map in place, and connecting to other fellow educators through the roundtable discussions in all the films and the reflections that they write. We have an events program always. This is one of them, but there are many, many more events, as always, as you'll know, on discoveryeducation.co.uk/events. We also encourage you to find out more about this Pathway program itself, which is in many, many schools now. A whole school site license now, rather than individual pricing, which I know originally we looked at. We are also looking at whole school pricing, whole site, which as a head teacher here, I've got to say, I find much easier, because if you're on a limited budget, which we are, and you have a good number of staff, and you can't afford it for every single member of staff, well, which one are you going to do the Pathway program for, where you're going to support their motivation, their well-being, their career aspirations? It's like choosing which is your favorite child. A whole site, a whole school site, a whole school license completely takes that dilemma away, which is great. So I'm pleased that we're doing that actually now, and that's also helped many, many more schools. Right, so find out more, go to the URL there on the /pathway, and also there's the direct link is actually put into the chat from my brilliant colleague Bobby, as always. So I hope that's been useful. I am going to go fairly soon, because I have back-to-back parents' evenings. We have a year 6 parents evening and a year 10 and 11 parents evening tonight, starting at 5. So we're going to go and set the tables up. So we're keeping it real. I hope you have a good evening, and thank you so much for joining today. And I look forward to the next one, which is in November. I believe I think Bobby will probably put the date up. I think it's the 24th. It's around that time, towards the end of November, where we have another Advice for the Current Times webinar with the head of advice, Guy Dudley, within the Pathway program at NHT. So that's always a really interesting discussion about what's on your mind at the moment, advice for the current times. So until then, have a good evening, and I'll see you on the other side of half term. Many thanks for joining. Bye-bye.